Another response video to Hythloday. Yeah, look, I don't know how much this is worth it. It just seems like so much work. We keep going over the same things, just trying to get to some basic premises of how you do value logic in the universe. And, now he wants the word need explained. Necessary. I thought we already went over this. That has to do with the values, right? You come up with these value definitions. You say harm is bad. You say preventing a harm is good. So there we've established one of the absolutes. And then the whole point of the BENATAR asymmetry, as pointed out before, is that there's a certain variety of positives that aren't created by eliminating a good. I don't know what those are, but yeah, so that's what people claim. They claim that life produces this thing called free fun, fun that doesn't cost anything, and that that is a good. And the BENATAR argument is that when you take away that fun, if you prevented the fun from happening, it wouldn't be a bad. So not having your fun is not like going to prison. And that is the catch of life, because it doesn't produce something of intrinsic value. It doesn't show up. Life doesn't show up and rescue something in distress. It doesn't take imprisoned, horribly suffering souls from the depths of hell and rescue them to some, neutral or to some heaven. So it doesn't have that kind of positive value potential. And that's the catch. And that's the definition of the asymmetry, is that the choice of not playing the game has the benefit of taking all the negative out of the balance. There's nobody in prison, and you don't sacrifice anything truly necessary, because the only thing you're giving up is something you don't need, unless you create a needer. So if what you do, if your activity doesn't create a needer, then there's just no reason to do it. I mean, there's no reason to create the needer that's going to justify the activity. It's self-justifying then, and that's sort of something you don't do unless it's fail-safe. Should have wrote that down on a piece of paper. Important concept, fail-safe. It's one of those things you strive for. You say, well, we're going to do something. Let's, first do no harm. I mean, these are sentences I've already used in these videos. These concepts are just so simple, and for you to pervert this into a complex equation is just really irritating. So take it out of the human context. Let's just make it easy. Alright, and let's say it was your responsibility, you and Trick, let's say if you want to have the argument with Trick, it's your responsibility, alright, you have the power, it's been bestowed on you, to create life on Mars. Alright, you've been bestowed the power, and it's your decision, okay? There's no one's telling you what to do, you just have the power. The question is, do you exercise it? Do you sit there and support the Martian biological experiment, or do you not? And certainly you can qualify what the experiment entails in terms of, are you going to create just oceans of sea life just eating each other pointlessly? Yeah, 1,000,000 to 1 odds of reaching your first birthday? Or are you going to do something more elaborate and fancy and have a fancier kind of silly machine wobble around saying, I'm important, I'm a Martian, needing things? That's, you can qualify the experiment that way. So yeah, make it something just like humans, okay, except maybe they're 8 foot tall, and got, X-ray vision, and maybe one of those fancy, like an avatar, they got a little, penis tail or something, so they can have little sex things with their tails. Anytime they want, they just wiggle their tail at something and go, ooh, ooh, ooh. So they're kind of cooler than humans, because, they don't have to go through that weird sex thing. They can just have weird sex any old time, just, mess with your tail a little bit. Whatever. Create your own little fantasy world. and then explain logically why you would say it's a good idea to create it. All right, and that's the what's put to you by this the BENATAR asymmetry and the question about life on Earth. It's just life anywhere. It's just what is the biological experiment of what value is it really, absolutely, fundamentally, intrinsically, and is it something one can justify imposing? And that's what it comes down to, is it is just an imposition. You decide for them that they're going to exist. And whether that has any ethical justification. The arrogance built into that. Alright. So yeah, so just talk about like you're going to put Martians on Mars, and then explain exactly how it's a wise thing to do. How it makes some kind of sense. And there, I think you'll fail. I think you'll fail to be able to make an argument that there's any rational, logical reason to open the door to the huge potential for harm, and that's what you'd have with make it the same kind of deal, where you're gonna potentially suffer a great deal, and you're potentially going to have great, wonderful feelings, experiences, they'll call them. They'll last about 17 seconds. Anyway, so here's the chart of the keywords here. Harm, we should be able to understand that's the negative feeling stuff. The good word we've been over. Two kinds of good. The good of removing a negative, and the good that is whatever that extra good cupcake crap is. And then you got the bad stuff. The bad is just the harm. We know those two words are connected. Preventing a negative is a positive, so that's one of the goods. And then preventing a positive, conditional, isn't a negative. That's the asymmetry. Okay, and this positive is a conditional positive in the sense that this isn't a positive created by destroying a negative. This is some other kind of positive. Obviously, preventing a positive that was compensating or destroying a negative, well, that would be a bad thing because you bring the negative back. So, but obviously if you take away a positive that doesn't have a negative correlate to it, that doesn't have a negative predecessor, isn't that what the argument's really about? You're saying there's some sort of free lunch that's possible to eat here. That somehow the biological mechanism can create a free lunch, and that somehow we can feed on it in some sort of productive, efficient way. Alright, so we had a problem with the word need and necessary. And that comes just down to net. So net improvement in overall condition. So the way your experiment is going to be judged on Mars is going to be based on its overall creation of something called a state of being, a welfare state in the sentient beings. A certain number of them will per year will experience sensations. They'll all experience sensations, and they'll do it in different proportions. And some will have extremely bad sensations, and some will have extremely good sensations, and in whatever degree. And the real question is that's going to be the net circumstance. And they're going to do it for a certain number of years in certain environments. So you have to count all the wars and all the Holocaust and all the plagues, and the horror of all of that stuff has to somehow be justified by whatever it is you think you accomplished in terms of chasing your gratification. And that's how you define what's necessary. What's necessary is net improvement in a condition, a circumstance. Alright? Something becomes, it's necessary for you to create Mars if you can logically find a reason that it creates a net improvement in the welfare state of the matter in the universe. The matter is somehow elevated and made improved by existing in the form called life on Mars. That's your imperative. That's the parameter of your logical equation. It's just to demonstrate how you can balance the positives and negatives to justify the act, to say yes, this is going to improve the circumstance. And my argument to you is that no, fundamentally life is a zero-sum game. You do have to create the need and the desire first, and those conditions are fundamentally, whether perceived by the individuals experience them as negative, they are fundamentally negative conditions of deprivation, of addiction, and that's what motivates the organism, is a need to replace what has been taken from them. They have been made incomplete, and they attempt to create completeness by feeding on the world around them, both in terms of the things they desire, both biologically and psychologically. Fundamentally, though, we see that the biology rules in terms of food and consumption, reproduction are the primary motivators, and then you have the thing that makes those two things easier is winning the hierarchy game, which becomes an ego game, and that becomes the mechanism is basically this acquire power to make it possible for you to win somehow win by consuming your betters or your equals anyway, things just as valuable as yourself. And there's the cannibalism I speak of, and so that's the game we're playing. And so I'm just saying I don't think there's any logical construction you can build to say you have any nearly enough confidence to say that life should be initiated on Mars, that you're capable of managing it, that you know what kind of balance should exist to justify the harm you know you're going to do. You're going to cause some individuals on Mars, let's say, like I said, the proportions are similar to what they are on Earth, that there's going to be significant amount of sentient suffering, and for what accomplishment? To create something that needs itself. Isn't that just essentially a wank? To put a wank in the universe? And you'll justify it by saying what? We're so cool that, yeah, why not try it with some other Frankenstein? Without entering into some sort of ego bullshit, how are you going to justify imposing that suffering, not to rescue, not to save something from harm, but to create a non-fail-safe circumstance of grossly imperfect value economics? I mean, it's clearly not perfect math you're imposing. It's not fail-safe, and you can't project to me, you can't state to me, you can't make in your argument a single statement that is going to have any fundamental or absolute kind of integrity explaining what is going to be accomplished besides creating something that doesn't need to exist. Nothing needs it to exist currently. You don't need to. You and Trick are both sitting there saying, I personally have no personal gratification in the creation. Nothing will be gained. So how does the universe gain? How does it make the universe a better place to create potential for more harm? And that's your obligation, is to explain how you can justify your imposition. And that's simply the BENATAR argument. All right, get out of the realm of your human-based speciesism and explain how you think it's a good idea to create sentient feeling things in the universe that are basically vain, okay, and create they're self-justifying in declaring themselves winners. They self-declare, and then somehow that makes sense. That you would establish a system where the winners get to decide the winners, kind of retroactively. You just have to exist to win, and then you declare yourself victorious. Come on. This is all bullshit. So let me hear the argument explaining how how there's any logical imperative, because you can't create any kind of positive statement. There's no definition. Like I said, unless you create Martians that need Martians to exist, where do you make the need to the necessity? Where is the necessity to create Martians? What good can possibly be accomplished outside of a good created by satisfying needs that you're going to create? You're creating the mess, then you're going to clean up. Then they're going to create something to clean up the mess. That's essentially what you're arguing for. So explain how that makes any sense. To open the door of risk that you won't clean up all the mess, that your cleaners won't be as good as the things making the mess, the need mess. So explain it to me. Make your argument. Explain to me how we need Martians, how the universe is deprivated without Martians, and that Martians should exist. And then I will simply apply the same argument to Earthlings, and you can explain why Earthlings need to exist, because I don't think you're going to be able to find an explanation for why you would create Martians. And then I will simply point out that there's the same exact non-necessity for the existence of life on Earth as there is for life on Mars. There is no necessity, and we're just opening the door to huge waste by perpetuating it and advocating for it out of nothing more than ego. Because you're a speciesist, because you're owned by some dim-witted, and it is dim-witted in the sense that it has no logical foundation, notion of accomplishment. Life accomplishes nothing. It satisfies no deprivation. It does not create. It satisfies no need. It does not create. And it does so inefficiently. That's the definition of a failed experiment. It would be a failure if you did it on Mars, and it's a failure here. So deal with that. Yes, somehow rationally for a change. Excuse me. Anyway, till next time.